Back in 1995, a Canadian martial artist made a bold declaration to a reporter. His goal was to become the biggest motion picture action star in Hollywood. Jeff Wincott had already starred in 11 action films by that point, and he was a taekwondo champion who had trained under Stella Adler, the same legendary acting coach who shaped Marlon Brando and Robert De Niro. Black Belt magazine would soon name him one of the martial arts movie stars of the next century, and he had the fighting skills, the acting training, the look, and the screen presence to back up his ambitions. And yet not a single one of those 11 films had ever played in an American theater. Foreign audiences watched him on the big screen, while Americans could only find him in the action aisle of their local video store. When asked about this strange reality, Wincott offered a response that carried more weight than he probably realized at the time, saying simply that everyone wonders why, and so do I. What followed would be a career defined by talent that never found its proper stage, a devastating personal collapse that nearly ended everything, and an unlikely redemption that gave his story a different kind of meaning. Fighting was embedded in Jeff Wincott from birth. He came into the world on May 8, 1956, in Toronto's working-class Scarborough neighborhood, where his father, an English amateur boxer, understood what it meant to use your fists. His mother hailed from Piacenza, Italy, bringing an old-world toughness to the household that shaped both Wincott boys. Jeff wasn't the only one destined for the screen, because his younger brother Michael would eventually become one of Hollywood's most recognizable villains, delivering chilling performances as top dollar in The Crow and Guy of Gisborne and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. But while Michael found his niche playing antagonists in major theatrical releases, Jeff's path would wind through far less glamorous territory, and that divergence between two brothers from the same household tells you something about how arbitrary Hollywood success can be. Athletics consumed Jeff as a teenager, and the list of sports he pursued reads like someone trying to exhaust himself. Swimming, wrestling, football, rugby, water polo, and he excelled at all of them. Martial arts captured his imagination most deeply, and he started studying karate around age 13 before transitioning to taekwondo a couple of years later. The North American Open Championship was his by age 15, with the Ontario Open title following soon after. A 5th degree black belt in karate and a black belt in taekwondo eventually hung on his wall, credentials that would have allowed him to pursue competitive martial arts at the highest levels. A swimming scholarship came his way, and he turned it down. The theater program at Ryerson University is where he enrolled instead, because while other future action stars stumbled into acting almost by accident, Jeff Wincott trained to become an actor first, and let the fighting enhance what he could already do. Ryerson was just the beginning of an acting education that separated Wincott from nearly every other martial artist who would eventually populate the direct-to-video action scene. New York City came next, where he studied privately with Michael Kahn, a renowned teacher at Juilliard. Stella Adler herself was his next instructor, and her acting studio had produced some of the most celebrated performers in American cinema history, including Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, and Warren Beatty. Now, Jeff Wincott was learning the same techniques and absorbing the same philosophy about character and craft that had shaped those legends. Training with legends didn't pay the bills, though, and to survive in those lean years, Jeff did whatever it took. Breakdancing classes brought in some money. Mime performances on Venice Beach for spare change covered the rest. He scraped by on the margins while waiting for his moment, and that moment arrived in a way he hadn't anticipated. Small roles trickled in during the early 1980s, including a brief appearance in the 1980 horror film Prom Night alongside Jamie Lee Curtis. Canadian television appearances followed without much fanfare. Everything changed in 1985 when Jeff landed the role of Detective Frank Giambone on Night Heat, a Canadian police drama that would become genuinely groundbreaking. The show made history as the first Canadian-produced drama series to air simultaneously on an American network, running on CBS during its late-night block. 4 seasons of gritty, realistic storytelling followed, all shot entirely at night on Toronto streets, with Jeff playing the hot-headed, impulsive young detective opposite Scott Hyland's veteran cop. Gemini Awards for Best Drama Series came in both 1986 and 1987, and Jeff himself received a nomination for Outstanding Lead Actor. Major guest stars like Danny Aiello, Hector Elizondo, and David Carradine appeared throughout the run, and by the time the series ended in 1989, Jeff Wincott had proven he could carry a show. The transition to action films happened in 1991, when producer Pierre David was casting Martial Law 2, Undercover. The production needed someone who could fight convincingly and act competently, a combination that was surprisingly rare in the low-budget action world. When David questioned whether Wincott could really handle himself in a fight, Jeff's response was characteristically direct, telling him that he could stand you and you up and knock all 3 of you down. The role was his after that, and paired with Cynthia Rothrock, the undisputed queen of martial arts cinema, Wincott delivered a performance that immediately established him as something special in the direct-to-video landscape. The fight scenes were crisp, brutal, and technically impressive, but the scenes between the action actually worked too, and Jeff brought a legitimacy to his character that most of his peers simply couldn't match. A remarkable run of films followed, establishing Wincott as the unofficial king of 90s straight-to-video action. Mission of Justice in 1992 gave him one of the most memorable fight sequences of the entire era, a scene known as the Gauntlet where his character battles through roughly 40 armed opponents using stick fighting techniques. The only problem was that Jeff had never trained with fighting sticks before, and his entire preparation for this elaborate sequence consisted of a single 45-minute session with an Eskrima master. He pulled it off anyway, and the scene became legendary among action fans. One of the stuntmen Jeff was beating down during that chaotic shoot was a young Chad Stahelski, the same man who would eventually direct the John Wick franchise. Matthias Hughes, the towering German martial artist, served as the film's primary antagonist, and their final confrontation delivered exactly what fans wanted to see. PM Entertainment became Wincott's primary home during these years, and the production company had built an empire on low-budget action films that somehow delivered spectacular stunts despite their financial limitations. Deadly Bet came in 1992, and Last Man Standing followed in 1995. Martial Outlaw in 1993 required a grueling 3-month training regimen where Jeff trained twice daily at the gym, eliminated sugar, dairy, fruit, and bread from his diet, and got his body fat down to 8%. The dedication showed on screen in every frame. His films featured car chases that rivaled anything in theatrical releases, explosions that seemed far too expensive for their budgets, and fight choreography that satisfied even hardcore martial arts enthusiasts. Audiences in Europe, Asia, and South America watched Jeff Wincott on the big screen, which made it all the more frustrating that only in North America were his films relegated to video store shelves. The contrast with his younger brother Michael became more pronounced with each passing year. That same year Jeff made Martial Law 2, Michael landed the role of Guy of Gisborne in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, a major studio production starring Kevin Costner. Michael's distinctive raspy voice and menacing presence made him a natural villain, and Hollywood recognized that immediately. Top dollar in The Crow came in 1994, a role that achieved theatrical release, critical attention, and lasting cultural significance. Alien Resurrection put him opposite Sigourney Weaver, and collaborations with Oliver Stone, Ridley Scott, Terrence Malick, and Jim Jarmusch followed over the years. Jordan Peele's Nope in 2022 marked his most recent high-profile appearance. Two brothers from the same Toronto neighborhood had the same dreams of making it in Hollywood, and one became a respected character actor working with auteur directors, while the other became the face of a format that carried no prestige regardless of how entertaining the actual films were. Six-figure salaries for lead roles had become standard for Jeff by the mid-1990s, and producers no longer asked him to audition because they simply offered him parts instead. Peak physical condition was his norm, maintained through training at the famous Gold's Gym in Venice Beach and running marathons in his spare time. Everything appeared to be working from the outside. The theatrical breakthrough he craved remained elusive, though, and something inside him began to fracture under that pressure. 41 years old after decades of clean living and athletic discipline, and that's when Jeff Wincott tried cocaine for the first time. The substance hijacked his brain chemistry with terrifying efficiency, and what started as experimentation became dependency, which then became a prison he couldn't escape. He would later describe addiction as being like fighting for your life, where you throw punches, you spit blood, your knees buckle, and you wonder who's going to win, the disease or you. 42 years old, and Jeff overdosed on Sunset Boulevard, that iconic stretch of Los Angeles real estate where dreams are both made and destroyed. Survival didn't immediately break the addiction's grip, though, and several more years of struggle followed as he watched his career fade from even the modest heights it had reached. The phone stopped ringing. Offers dried up completely. The man who had once hoped to rival Schwarzenegger and Stallone found himself fighting a battle that had nothing to do with cameras or choreography. His marriage crumbled under the weight. His sense of self collapsed entirely. Everything he had built seemed to evaporate in a haze of desperation and poor choices, and rock bottom kept getting lower. Recovery communities call it the gift of desperation, and that's what finally reached Jeff Wincott. Treatment followed, and he committed to sobriety with the same intensity he had once brought to his martial arts training. The road back was neither quick nor easy, but he walked it with determination that surprised even those who knew him best. Hollywood began giving him another chance slowly, though not in the way he had originally imagined. Lead roles in action films weren't coming his way anymore, and instead Jeff reinvented himself as a character actor. The industry that had once sorted him into the direct-to-video box now welcomed him into prestige television. The Wire, one of the most acclaimed dramas in television history, featured him in episodes. A recurring role on 24 followed. Sons of Anarchy brought him back multiple times as Jimmy Kakuza, a mobster character that appeared across several seasons. Blue Bloods, Person of Interest, The Good Wife, NCIS, and The Night Of on HBO in 2016 all added to his credits during this reinvention period. The moment that must have felt both vindicating and bittersweet came in 2010. Director Tony Scott cast Jeff in Unstoppable, a high-budget action thriller starring Denzel Washington and Chris Pine that told the true story of a runaway freight train and the men who risked their lives to stop it. Jesse Coulson, the brother of Pine's character, was a supporting role, but a visible one in a major theatrical release. The film earned an Oscar nomination for Best Sound Editing and grossed over $167 million worldwide. After all those years of films that never escaped the video store, Jeff Wincott finally appeared on American movie screens. The star billing he'd always wanted wasn't there, but he was present in a way that mattered, and sometimes the dreams we chase arrive in forms we didn't anticipate. Hollow Metropolis Films launched in 2019, a production company Jeff founded with his wife Charlotte, who holds a PhD in neuroscience. Their goal was telling stories with personal and social significance, and their scientific backgrounds would prove useful for their most important project. The issue with Elvis came in 2020, a drama starring Jeff alongside their son Wolfgang that went on to win over a dozen awards at international film festivals, including multiple Best Feature honors. Their next collaboration demonstrated how far Jeff had traveled from the action hero persona that once defined him, and it required more courage than any fight scene he'd ever filmed. Fall Fight Shine premiered in 2021, a documentary about addiction and recovery that featured Jeff's own story at its center. His cocaine addiction, his overdose, and his long journey back to stability all became public knowledge for the first time. The film combined his personal narrative with scientific explanations of how addiction affects the brain, drawing on Charlotte's expertise in interviews with leading researchers. His explanation for making it was simple, saying he decided to tell his story alongside scientists who explain what addiction is because he wanted people to learn about this disease of the brain, destigmatize it, and start conversations, and that recovery is real. Best Feature Documentary at the Toronto Independent Film Festival and Best Documentary at the Hollywood Women's International Film Festival followed the premiere. Charlotte received the Activism Award from the Hollywood Women's Film Institute for her work in the addiction space. The man who had spent decades punching and kicking his way through low-budget action films had found a new mission that had nothing to do with fight choreography and everything to do with helping others survive what nearly destroyed him. 68 years old now, and Jeff Wincott has maintained his sobriety for more than 2 decades. 30 films, 6 theater roles, and nearly 150 television appearances fill his official biography. He describes himself as a devoted father and husband who celebrates life and sobriety every day. That's not the career he envisioned back in 1995 when he told that reporter he wanted to become the biggest action star in Hollywood. The fame of Van Damme or Seagal never materialized. No franchise bore his name. Household recognition remained out of reach, but what he found might be more valuable than celebrity ever could have been. His philosophy now centers on a simple truth he shares with others facing addiction, explaining that if there's a problem and he drinks, then the problem is just going to get worse. But if he doesn't drink or use, he can walk through that problem to get to a solution. The arbitrary nature of success in an industry that sorts talent into categories and rarely allows escape defined Jeff Wincott's career for decades. Skills, training, dedication, and screen presence all existed in abundance, and he could act circles around most of his direct-to-video peers while fighting as convincingly as anyone in the business. Hollywood operates on logics that have little to do with merit, though, and Jeff ended up on the wrong side of an invisible line. His films went to video, while lesser talents got theatrical releases. His brother became a respected character actor, while Jeff became the king of a format that carried no prestige. The pressure of unfulfilled potential combined with the emptiness that can follow years of grinding without recognition, and he fell into an abyss that nearly claimed his life. Climbing out of that darkness, rebuilding his career on different terms, and using his platform to help others facing addiction makes his story worth telling. Not every action hero gets to save himself, and Jeff Wincott managed to do exactly that.